afternoon, my fellow members of the Cary Chamber of Commerce, and welcome to our 58th Annual Banquet. I want to thank you today for supporting our organization, your organization, and for your participation today. I'm Steve Zaytoon of Zaytoon & Associates, and it's been my pleasure to serve as chairman this past year. Each of you have had a tremendous impact on Cary's past, present, and our future to come. Our chamber works diligently in 4 areas: economic development, education, governmental relations, and member business services. Our organization works hands-on to understand the needs of our business members. Our partnership with local government, including the town of Cary and Wake County, continues to build stronger every year. Cary is growing and continues to be recognized in the state and the region as an economic force. Our role as a chamber is to carry this momentum forward, and we are very, very proud of this role. Please continue to stay engaged with our chamber, and I thank you for your support and your leadership. Before we go any further, I would like to thank our presenting sponsors today, Atlantic Tire and MetLife. Thank you both for supporting your chamber in this way. At this time, I would also like to recognize our current board members who are listed in your programs. They have committed to stay on for another term this year to maintain stability for our chamber during these unstable times in our country. We are grateful to them for their service. I'm also personally grateful to each one of you. Thank you. I know that most of you are enjoying your lunch right now and have hopefully had some time to visit with your team and network, but I would like to give an invocation to bless the food and all of you. Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this gift of life, this gift of fellowship. We thank you for the gift of this community of which we are proud to be part of. We ask your blessing on all those out there today, those in need of any need of COVID-related or non-COVID-related. We ask your blessing on all those who are frontline for us, hospital workers, first responders, all those charities that are supporting all of our citizens. And Lord, we thank you for this food, and we also bless our troops and our country. In your name we pray, amen.
Thank you, Steve. Good afternoon, Chamber members. I'm Howard Johnson, President of the Cary Chamber, and it's my pleasure to introduce our wonderful corporate sponsors. As Steve said earlier, our presenting sponsors are MetLife and Atlantic Tire and Service, and we're really appreciative of what they've given to the Chamber through this COVID. Our gold sponsors are Hendrick Cary Auto Mall, the town of Cary, UNC Rex Healthcare, and Wake Med Cary Hospitals. Our silver sponsors are First Bank, Highwoods Properties, and Town Bank. And yes, our community partner is Duke Energy. Many thanks to Prestonwood Country Club here where we're doing our annual banquet, and we look forward to having you back next year here in person. And we're most appreciative of Prestonwood Country Club. They're fixing to host their 20th annual SAS Championship, so congratulations to Prestonwood Country Club and SAS. And today we welcome a new member. Clear Coast Productions is doing all of our videos. So to Rose and her team, we welcome you to our business community, and thank you to all for what you've done to put us through this COVID. We have several elected officials with us today, and you can see them listed. I will not go through each, but what they do for us each day in the business community, we're most appreciative. I would like to introduce the partner with the Cary Chamber, the town of Cary. We have with us the Mayor, Harold Weinberg, Mayor Pro Tem Don France, Lori Bush, Yalu, Jennifer Robinson, Jack Smith, and Ed Gearhahn. We're most appreciative of our past chairs, and they're listed before you now, the leadership they have given to our business community over the last 35 years. We thank you for your service. It is my pleasure to now introduce Eric Hundley with SAS, and who's on our board of directors, to introduce our keynote speaker. Eric, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Eric Hundley, and I'm the Vice Chair of Government Relations for the Cary Chamber, and also a Senior Manager in the U.S. Government Practice at SAS. It's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker today. As the Director of Public Sector and Financial Services Practice at SAS, Steve Bennett is passionate about helping governments around the world put their data to work for the citizens they serve, and helping financial services firms maximize revenue and improve their customers' experience. In his current role, he drives strategic industry positioning and messaging in the global public sector and financial services markets. Prior to SAS, Steve held several leadership positions during his 12 years in the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Following the events of September 11th, 2001, Steve led the design and application of quantitative analysis to inform some of the United States' most challenging security decisions. Most recently as the director of the National Biosurveillance Integration Center. Over the course of his career in government, he led numerous efforts to provide analytical decisions support to senior officials in the White House and across the U.S. government. Steve holds a doctorate in computational biochemistry from Stanford, as well as undergraduate degrees in biology and chemistry from Caltech, and he has authored a number of publications. When not supporting improved analytics in government and financial services, he's coaching youth soccer, leading children ministry at his church, and building something in his workshop. It's my pleasure today to welcome Dr. Steve Bennett.
Eric, thank you for that wonderful introduction. It is great to be here. Let me start with a story. In 1995, two men left their homes in Saudi Arabia to fight in the Balkan Wars. And they got a lot of combat experience fighting in Eastern Europe, and when they returned home to Saudi Arabia, they then spent several years in 1999 and 2000 in training camps for Al-Qaeda. It was then Al-Qaeda. And these two men, Nawaf al-Hamzi and Khalid al-Madar, rose through the ranks of Al-Qaeda and to the point where they were noticed by the leadership at that time, Osama bin Laden and his deputies, who were looking for people to participate in the events that we now know as September 11th. So those two men, they traveled to Malaysia in January of 2000. And we knew about this because our intelligence community intercepted phone calls from them in Yemen, and they attended an Al-Qaeda summit in Malaysia in January of 2000. And while they were there, the final attack plans were developed for September 11th, and we had asked, the United States had asked the Malaysian intelligence services to infiltrate that meeting and find out what they were going to talk about. So we knew about it, but the microphone was broken on the video recorder for that. They got in, but they weren't able to catch any sound. So we had faces, we knew who was there, but we didn't know the details of what they discussed. So from Malaysia in January of 2000, they ended up in the west coast of the United States, traveling through Thailand. They entered the United States on legitimate student visas, which they then overstayed, as we know. And they spent the next year in the United States interacting with a range of law enforcement and other authorities. They interacted with state and local law enforcement. They applied for multiple driver's licenses in multiple states. They got in traffic accidents, got speeding tickets, lots of different touch points. And then with about 5 weeks to go before the events of September 11th, another nation gave the United States a list of intelligence information, people who they said were involved in imminent attack planning against the United States. And this nation told us, we think some of them may already be in the United States. And these two men were on that list. So as the 9/11 Commission wrote about it, the US government had access to lots of information. We knew their names, the intelligence services knew about them, the FBI knew about them. They came in under legitimate student visas, so Customs and Immigration knew about them. So it wasn't that the United States lacked information. The problem was the US lacked the ability to connect that information together to make a timely security decision. So it wasn't lack of information, it was the difficulty in processing that information to make a timely security decision. And so the story of 9/11 isn't just a story of the difficulty of the US government making a good decision based on information it had. It's also my story. I spent 12 years in the US Department of Homeland Security after finishing my scientific training, trying to help prevent these sorts of things from happening again, helping the United States avoid missing the connections between information and data that is so critical for making good, timely decisions. In this case, decisions that can save lives of Americans. And so I spent 12 years in Homeland Security before coming to SAS, working on this problem, taking data and connecting it together. And so today, we call that analytics. Analytics is the scientific process of transforming data into insights for decision making. And interestingly, what I want to do today, I want to talk to you a little bit about decision making. I want to talk to you about how this discipline of taking information and applying it to decision making, analytics, I want to talk to you about how it can make a difference for us as a country, really as a society, and to you in everything that you do. Interestingly, people have been using tools to help make decisions for a long time. You can see on this slide 2 pages drawn from Charles Darwin's many diaries over the course of his career. Now, you know Charles Darwin, the famous naturalist from the 19th century, kept many diaries and journals about species that he observed and biological phenomena that he recorded. And these are 2 pages from the middle of one of his diaries. And if you look there on the left, you can see a list, and on the top it says marry, and on the right it says not marry. It's a pros and cons list as to whether or not he thinks he should get married. And there's some funny things in here. He says, reasons to get married, constant companionship, better than having a dog, things like that. But on the not marry side, it says, one of the cons for against getting married is he would have to give up clever conversations with men in the club. So we've always used these decision tools, some of them as simple as a pros and cons list. And by the way, he did end up getting married, so he ended up on the left side of that list. We've always used these sorts of tools to try to help us make better decisions, because humans have a hard time making objective decisions and bringing all of the information together. So let me fast forward from Charles Darwin to 1943 and World War II. Where what we call analytics really was born out of the battlefields in Europe. So the Allies were flying these bombing runs over Germany, launching from England, and they were observing these B-17s coming back from bombing runs over Europe with a significant amount of battle damage, bullet holes all over them, and some of those planes unfortunately didn't make it home after the mission was complete. And so what the Allies did, the British and the Americans, they started to analyze the battle damage on these aircraft, and I'll show you a picture here of what some of that looked like. And what they saw on the aircraft was a lot of battle damage on these returning aircraft in certain places, the wings and the fuselage, but they saw no battle damage, no bullet holes in the cockpit or around the engines. And they kind of analyzed how many bullet holes per square foot on the surface of the plane. And so you can see in the picture that it was concentrated around the wings and the fuselage. And so, being good planners, they wanted to know, where can we place armor on these planes to increase the likelihood that they'll make it home? Now, we can only use so much of it, because if you add a lot of armor, it makes the planes heavy, reduces fuel capacity and duration of flight, and makes them slower and more vulnerable. And if you don't put enough armor, it makes them vulnerable to attack from German anti-aircraft fire. So you couldn't armor the whole plane; you had to pick and choose. And so, where do you think they put the armor? Well, they put the armor on the places where they saw all the bullet holes. They said, well, we see all this damage, let's put the armor where we see all of this damage. And a Hungarian statistician who was working at Columbia University, here's a picture of him, his name was Abraham Wald, he said, that's exactly wrong. Because the planes that are surviving, the ones that are making it home, they're the ones with battle damage on the wings and the fuselage. So it must not be critical to the aircraft's survival if they're shot in those places. The planes that aren't making it home are the ones that are getting shot at the engines and the fuselage, and that's why you don't see them in your data set. So we're going to put armor in the places where we don't see any battle damage on the returning aircraft. And so problems like this in 1943 are where what we call analytics today was born. This was the very first time anybody had taken data and insights and tried to apply them in a quantitative way to solving a real problem, a real operational problem. It's not academic. These guys wanted to get these planes back and keep these crews safe. So we called it operations research back then, and the definition sounds a lot like what I showed you a minute ago as the definition of analytics, what we do at SAS and what people do around the world today. So operations research, defined here on screen there, is a scientific method of providing executive departments with a quantitative basis for decisions regarding the operations under their control. So that looks a lot like what we just saw in that definition of analytics, taking data and information and applying it to a critical decision. So what about SAS? Let me talk a little bit about sort of my home and what we do at SAS. And our story started with cows. Our story started with agricultural data back in the late 1970s, trying to solve the same problem. How do we make good decisions about agricultural crop planning and agricultural statistics? And so with some analysis of crop data from the USDA and the National Institutes of Health, SAS was born trying to solve these sorts of problems. Now today, our mission is transforming a world of data into a world of intelligence. How do we take not just aircraft survivability and cows, but any problem where you have data, and how can we apply that data to the decision-making process so that decisions can be made better, faster, and cheaper? Whether you're a bank, whether you're a government, you're an energy company, or anything in between, your data can be used to help make better decisions. So with that as kind of a setup, what I want to do is I want to run through a bunch of stories. I want to tell you a bunch of stories about how data and analytics can make a difference in real decisions, and hopefully you'll see areas where this might impact what you do. One of the first areas is data management. Using your data and understanding it and getting it together to help you is really, really important. And this isn't, again, just theoretical or academic. Some time ago, you may remember the story in 2008 of two college students here in the Triangle who lost their lives. And when the police looked into this, and one of them was the student body president down the street at Chapel Hill. And when the police began to unwind what went on in the investigation, they observed that the two gentlemen that were responsible had been in front of a judge several weeks before the crime, and because the wrong folder of paperwork went to the wrong courtroom, these men were released, and the judge didn't know that there were reasons to hold them. And so these two college students lost their lives. That was just 12 years ago here in the Triangle. And so, of course, the state of North Carolina took a step back and said, how can we prevent this from happening again? So data quality is not just an academic thing. It can be the difference between life and death for law enforcement. So we at SAS partnered with the state to try to help them achieve their goal of that never happening again. And so we worked with them to build a system called CJ Leads, which pulls together all 109 sources of all law enforcement information across the state, everything from hunting and fishing licenses to the sexual offender registry and everything in between, handgun registry. All of that appears in one place so that anybody in the law enforcement or judicial community, criminal justice community, can see it on, as we say, one screen of glass. And that helps make sure that those sorts of things don't happen, and it makes sure that when an officer walks up to a vehicle in the state of North Carolina, he or she has all of the information about the person they're about to go talk to. So estimates that it saves officers' lives as well. So data quality is a really important thing that analytics can do as a way that makes a difference, not just in law enforcement, but really in any industry. Another important area where analytics can help make better decisions is around data visualization. One of my other jobs at SAS, in addition to being the director of our global government practice, for the last 6 months I've been our incident commander for our global COVID-19 response. And so we have, our CEO, Dr. Goodnight, cares very much about taking what we do at SAS and putting it out there to really help the world, first our neighbors here at home in the Triangle and in North Carolina, but also all around the world. And so I was asked to help take what we're good at, data and analytics, and help get that out into the world, into the hands of government and healthcare, so that we can take what we've been blessed with and really help save lives and help protect economies around the world. So one of the areas of visualization, we show you something that we built. We built a dashboard that we made freely available to help understand how things were changing as the pandemic progressed. And this allows government and healthcare leaders around the world to make better decisions knowing what the pandemic is doing. Another important area where analytics can help support better decision making is optimization. So optimization is a kind of a fancy word. It just means you've got limited time, limited materials, limited people, limited money, which I think all of us suffer from that problem somewhere in our lives. And so optimization is this discipline where you take your data and your information and you try to make the most of it given the limitations that you have. And so we've done a lot of that in COVID-19 response as well. So one example of that is epidemiological modeling, a fancy word just to say we can use data to understand where this disease is going to spread, where it's going to go next. And that is something that has been really essential to hospitals in the United States and around the world, in particular Cleveland Clinic in Ohio, who used epidemiological modeling and analytics to make a decision about how many hospital beds they needed to plan for the coming wave of increased cases. So again, looking at data and putting it to work for you and for your decisions aren't just academic exercises. They can make real differences and, in the case of COVID-19, save lives. So along those same lines, another industry that was hard hit during COVID-19, we can all understand why, has been retail. And so we have, in addition to analytics helping with hospitalization and on the medical side, and I'll talk more about that in a minute, we're able to use analytics to help the retail industry kind of predict where things are going to go so they can have a better chance of surviving. So we've worked with a number of global distributors and retailers to help them understand how they can predict what their supply chain is going to look like. Where do they see things coming, or where do they see shortages, so they can make the most of those, make good decisions about what to put on the shelves that consumers might need, and making sure their supply chain can support that on the back end. But again, back to thinking about medical resources in COVID-19. We've worked with a number of countries, including the United States, to help optimize medical resources, keeping with that theme of optimization. You heard early in the pandemic this concern about are we going to have enough ICU beds as we see this wave of people getting very sick, progressing through Europe and Italy and Germany and Spain and New York? Are we going to have enough ICU beds to handle critically ill patients? And you can use analytics to do that. You can use analytics to help decide which beds should be assigned to which patients and in what order to maximize the use of limited resources. Again, you've only got so many of these ICU beds and ventilators. You can use data to help you decide where do you deploy those to get the most out of them, so they go to the right patients at the right time. So that's an area where we have led globally to help do that. The next area I want to share with you, ways that analytics can kind of help you with decisions, is something we call anomaly detection, a fancy way to say finding that needle in the haystack, right? A lot of what we want to do when we look at our data, we want to find things that stick out, something that looks a little bit different so that we can take action. And there's lots of examples of that, but one of them from COVID-19 is working with the Brazilian government. We worked with the Brazilian government. Like many countries, they were worried about how quickly they can get aid into the hands of families that need it. And they had a $50 billion program to push resources out to families that needed it. But unfortunately, anytime the government is giving out money, sometimes people line up who maybe aren't eligible for that money and try to take advantage of the government because it's trying to move quickly. And so we worked with Brazil to help identify and quickly qualify which families were eligible for that aid so that the right resources went to the right families in Brazil that needed it, rather than going to people who were trying to commit fraud and steal that money from families that needed it. Same sort of thing in the UK. A lot of countries around the world struggle with how to deal with unemployment. And in the UK, they had a benefit where if you were unemployed, the government would cover up to 80% of your salary. Now that benefit was managed through employers, and it's the same sort of thing. The UK government was concerned that some employers, most are honest and want to help their employees, but some, they were worried about fraudulently claiming they had employees that were laid off that really weren't. And so the same sort of thing there, helping that agency in the UK manage those benefits in a way that it got to the right families, the right British families who needed it. Another kind of tactical area where analytics helps make better decisions is around helping support governments or organizations that have equipment, that have stuff. And whether it's a military, the postal service, or the police department, lots of different parts of our society, or manufacturing floors, lots of parts of our society have equipment. And data and analytics can be incredibly helpful in making decisions about that equipment. On the defense side of things, we've partnered with Lockheed Martin, and we provide predictive maintenance using analytics for the F-35 and for the C-130, two of the most advanced airframes that fly in the sky. And again, analytics can help us understand when those pieces of equipment are going to break before they break. So it makes them more mission ready, and it keeps air crews safe. So again, real examples that aren't just kind of out of the theoretical side of things, but can really help make a difference in making better decisions. One kind of life and death example about equipment maintenance. This is a photograph from the 1953 North Sea flood in the Netherlands. And if you know much about the Netherlands, about a third of that country is below sea level. And so they have, for their entire history, they're always worried about water in the Netherlands and flooding. And in the 1953 North Sea flood, the North Sea overtopped a lot of those dikes and dams that you see in the photographs, these famous photographs of the Netherlands, and flooded the country. About 2,000 people died, and a massive displacement and loss of property. And so the government in the Netherlands set out on a 50-year infrastructure project to build a series of water containment measures better than they had before in the 1950s. And so we've worked with the government of the Netherlands to help them put sensors all over that equipment, 15,000 of them. And in real time, we can look at the data coming in from those sensors, including 4,000 of them floating in the North Sea. So we can understand quickly if things are changing in terms of weather. We can understand what equipment is doing, so we can fix it before it breaks. So again, real examples of analytics making a difference for real decisions. One of the last areas I want to talk to you about before I start to wrap up, and that is the area of citizen services. You know, my role at SAS is serving and supporting government. So I want to talk a little bit about the things that we do in citizen services. Again, that theme of unemployment that's so prevalent, unfortunately, due to the pandemic, you can use advanced analytics to actually help get people back to work faster. Let me tell you how. We work with a city in Europe, I can't tell you which one, but they had a goal of getting people back to work within 13 weeks of losing their job. And we're struggling to accomplish that goal. And it turns out we know a lot. As government, you know, they know a lot about their citizens. They know their age, their education status, whether they're married, do they have kids, lots of things about them, their work history, all of that. And we also have a whole bunch of unemployment programs, job counseling, training, trying to match them with employers. We have all kinds of things we can do on the government side. And it turns out that you can use something we call artificial intelligence, machine learning, if you've heard that buzzword, to automatically match the right people based on what we know of them with the best mix of government programs that would best serve them and get them back to work faster. And it works. It's amazing. It works. So using artificial intelligence, we've been able to help get people in the city back to work much faster. You know, the same sort of thing happens in criminal justice. Another example of artificial intelligence from law enforcement. There's a state in the Northwest, the state of Oregon, you know, unfortunately suffering a lot of problems from wildfires now. But like many states in the United States, they struggle with youth incarceration. You have teenagers or youth that end up in the criminal justice system, and they want to know, could we use data to do a better job keeping those kids from coming back into the system over and over again? And again, just like with that example of unemployment in Europe, you can use advanced artificial intelligence and, you know, sort of those buzzwords we read about, things like machine learning, to help do a better job of targeting which kids would do better with which sorts of programs to help keep them out of the juvenile justice system. One last one here, right from our neck of the woods down the road in New Hanover County, Wilmington. I don't know much about kind of the progression of the opioid crisis that all of our communities have been, you know, suffering in recent years, but the epicenter really along the entire East Coast for the opioid crisis has been New Hanover County. There's a bunch of reasons for that. But they really struggled with a lot of downstream problems from that opioid crisis. You had a lot of parents that were addicted or overdosing, and that led to downstream challenges in child neglect and child abuse. And Child Services, DSS, Department of Social Services in New Hanover County, was struggling to kind of keep up with the load on being able to manage families and understand which children were most at risk for abuse or harm. And so working with us, we were able to partner with them to say, well, what kind of data do you have? Can we pull together 911 data? Can we pull together data we know about these families? And in a very short amount of time, be able to tell them which families they should prioritize that might be at higher risk of having children that could be abused or harmed, so that we can take better care of them rather than kind of at random choosing which families we're going to focus on. So that data has already borne fruit in terms of reducing the amount of abuse and neglect in New Hanover County, and we think reducing the loss of life from child abuse and neglect there as well. One last story to tell you about before we start to close and talk about kind of where things are going, and that is contact tracing. So we've all heard about contact tracing in the news. It's somehow related to helping save the day in the pandemic, right? Well, the picture you see behind me is a picture from 1854. It's a neighborhood in London, and at that time in London in 1854, they were suffering a huge cholera outbreak. And so this neighborhood in particular had 500 deaths in just 2 weeks. And so everyone at that time thought that cholera was spread through the air. And so people were worried about kind of infectious disease through the air. And this gentleman here on the left, his name is John Snow. He was a physician in London, and he thought that cholera was spread through water. And to try to prove his hypothesis, he drew a very famous map. Here's a picture of it. Here's what he drew in September of 1854. And what he did, he went door to door in that neighborhood, and he interviewed everybody. And he asked, how many people died here? And he made a map. You can see it. How many people died at each location? I'll highlight it here for you in red. And what he saw that all of the deaths in this neighborhood clustered around a single water pump on Broad Street. And here's where it was, and circled in blue. That Broad Street water pump, turns out, that pump had been infected with cholera, and everybody was drawing their water from that pump, and that was the source of the outbreak in this neighborhood. And he proved it by taking the handle off the pump. Here's a picture of what that pump looks like today on Broad Street in downtown London. And he took the handle off the pump and effectively stopped the outbreak. And so this was one of the first, what we call epidemiological interventions. Modern epidemiology was born with Dr. John Snow in 1854. And today we kind of call this contact tracing, right? We want to interview people and understand, have you been exposed to somebody who has had the virus? Have you yourself tested positive? Who have you been around? And we want to contact them so we can isolate people and prevent the spread of disease. That's been a tried and true public health practice for hundreds of years, since John Snow, almost 200 years. It works very, very well at stopping spread of disease. Public health agencies all around the world use contact tracing we used it in the AIDS crisis in the 80s, used it for monitoring tuberculosis spread in communities. But the problem with COVID-19 is the scale. Our public health agencies around the world are overwhelmed. They just can't do it fast enough, using the old-fashioned techniques of calling people on the phone, knocking on doors, and kind of making lists. And so one of the things that we've done, we've partnered with public health around the world to kind of bring 21st century analytics to that problem. So you can see that these network connections are automatically built, and it helps those epidemiologists who are struggling with all of these COVID cases work much faster in figuring out who needs to be isolated and where the disease is spreading. So again, analytics coming alongside a very old-fashioned practice, bringing it into the 21st century, if you will, can make a real difference for saving lives in our communities, both here in the Triangle, in the United States, and around the world. So what's next? The organizers asked me to talk a little bit about future trends. I'll say a little bit about that. You know, you've heard some of the buzzwords from me already, things like artificial intelligence and machine learning. These are fantastic techniques that we're, exploring right down the street there at SAS, and using them in real problems like some of the ones I've shared with you today, not just academic exercises. So we see, government, banking, energy, telecommunications, all of our industries, retail, increasingly using their data to make better decisions and really being the better for it. So that's really where we see things going. It's not going to turn around. We're going to be using more and more data to make better, faster, and cheaper decisions as we go, and we don't see that reversing anytime soon. And I guess my last remark today, the organizers asked me when we were planning this conversation today, they said, can SAS predict who is going to win the presidential election? And the world premiere of that data, this is the first time anybody's ever seen it. I have that answer for you. Well, I must have left it at home. Oh. So we'll just continue. So that'll have to be revealed another time. Kidding, of course. But one of the things you can do, we've done a little bit of this. We've been on Sirius Radio talking about some of this work. We've analyzed voter registration data. I'll put that slide up for you. And anywhere there's data, you can interrogate that information to come up with insights. And so what we did is we looked at voter registration data and voter participation data in a couple of swing states, and we saw some interesting demographic trends. We saw some areas where for certain populations like the Black or Hispanic communities in some of these swing states, when they register to vote, they vote at very, very high rates. But overall, the population of registered voters in those communities is pretty low. And so that says, hey, if you want to drive kind of votes in that community, you really might want to think about voter registration drives. On the other side of that, we saw some communities that really you're trying to drive that are highly registered, but really aren't voting in high amounts. And so certain populations in Appalachia, and we call non-college educated white populations, we saw kind of the opposite. They're registered at higher amounts, but not participating. And so for those sorts of voters, you may be more interested in getting better voter turnout out of your registered voters. So really it's this battle of who can kind of do which of those kind of turnout drives better. So the data does sort of point to where the strategies might be for the different campaigns as we run into the last 45 days or so of the election. And then the last thing we looked at in some of this data was demographic changes in places like Texas, where you see the Hispanic population increasing by 20% since the last presidential election. And so those sorts of changes really do kind of change some of what we've assumed in electoral politics for quite a long time. And not getting into the partisan side of what that means for who's going to win, it just sort of highlights that there's much to be learned even in something like presidential elections by looking at data. And you can bet those campaigns are doing exactly that. They're looking at this data and using it to drive decisions about where they want to invest campaign resources. So, sorry I couldn't give you that prediction of who's going to win, but at least we got to look at a little bit of data to see, where things might be heading as we head into the last 45 days. So again, I just thank you for the invitation to speak with you and address you today. I would love to take any questions by email, or you can reach out to me on social media. I know this is virtual, but we'd love to interact with all of you about anything that we've talked about today, and we'd love to answer any questions. Thank you.
Dr. Bennett, thank you so much for being with us today. Appreciate it so much. Your comments are spot on, and I know our members enjoyed your talk. I didn't leave home without something in my pocket this morning. Here's a couple gift certificates to Ray's Restaurant for you to enjoy with your family. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's my pleasure.
All right. See you soon, sir.
Yep.
Each year, we are delighted to present awards to our chamber and community members who have shown outstanding leadership during the year. Without the support of our community leaders, such as yourselves, the chamber could not accomplish its mission to provide business leadership for quality growth and development in our Cary area. Presenting our Ambassador of the Year award will be Wendy Coulter, followed by Marty Clayton, presenting Business Leader of the Year, and finally, our honored Mayor, Harold Weinbrink, will present our Citizen of the Year. Please welcome Wendy Coulter.
Hello, I'm Wendy Coulter, the President and CEO of Hummingbird Creative Group and the Vice Chair for the Member Services Division for the Cary Chamber of Commerce. We are so proud that we have over 40 Cary Chamber ambassadors that dedicate their time throughout the year to mentor new members, attend ribbon cuttings, and volunteer for events. The recipient of this year's Ambassador of the Year award goes to someone who has been an ambassador for 7 years and is an advocate for the Cary Chamber at numerous ribbon cuttings. She is the first to volunteer for events, to collect auction items, and to bring in new members. She is an experienced health coach and a 5-language interpreter. She leads a Rodan & Fields team focused on bringing the #1 premium skincare brand in North America to the rest of the world. She is originally from Indonesia, where she owned a large manufacturing company, but decided to sell it and set out for the United States with her husband and 4 children. She is a powerful force in the workplace and uses her positive attitude and tireless energy to encourage others to work hard towards success. In her free time, she likes to garden, listen to music, and read books with her 3 grandchildren. We are proud to have her as our Ambassador of the Year for 2020. Congratulations to Frida Jahan.
Oh my gosh, I'm almost in tears and goosebumps all over. Thank you so much. Thank you for all this. Such an honor to be Cary Chambers members for the past 7 years. And since 2013, I have been an ambassador and doing ribbon cuttings. I love the people, I love the culture, I love the leadership that leads through the membership and all the stuff. They're all very friendly, very hardworking, very generous, and the culture is always giving forward and always generous in charity, everything. And I'm just happy to be the members of Cary Chambers, and I encourage everybody who is in Cary or Apex or Morrisville, come and see what we have in Cary Chambers. We are thriving and we are growing in Cary, and lots of good businesses. We're going to build this economy again. Thank you.
Our next award being presented is for our Business Leaders of the Year. As we all know, in mid-March, a sweeping pandemic came through our country. Hospitals across our nation were called upon to step up and serve our community in an even greater way than they already do. And we can all agree, as much training and preparation as can be done will never prepare us for what this pandemic has presented. Our hospitals and healthcare providers responded in a way that only they could, and to say that they made us proud is an understatement. Frontline workers, along with their colleagues, responded with swiftness and compassion to serve the greater good. Our hospitals were faced with thousands of hospitalizations, testing, safety for their staff, nurses, doctors, technicians, and patients. Many frontline workers quarantine themselves from family to ensure their safety and the safety of those loved ones who were also being impacted by this pandemic. I don't think many of us can identify with both the grueling schedule and the physical and mental demands and emotional toll this takes on these employees and their families. This year, like never before, has been a challenge, and that is why it is such an honor for me, both personally and professionally, on behalf of the Board of Directors, to salute and recognize Duke Raleigh Hospital, UNC Rex Healthcare, and WakeMed Hospitals as the business leaders of the year. Unprecedented times call for unprecedented leadership. We are grateful for not only what you do, but how you do it, and how you have all come together to care for our community. Today, we have with us Lee Bleeker, the interim president of Duke Raleigh Hospital, Ernie Bovio, president at UNC Rex Healthcare, and Thomas Goff, senior vice president and administrator at WakeMed Cary Hospital and North Hospital, to accept awards for Business of the Year. Congratulations and a heartfelt thank you. We are grateful for all you do to serve our community. At this time, I would like to invite Lee, Ernie, and Tom up to make comments. Thank you, and again, congratulations.
Thank you so much. It is with great pleasure that I accept the Cary Chamber's Business of the Year Award on behalf of Duke Raleigh Hospital. Duke Raleigh Hospital has been a long-standing member and part of the Wake County community, living our mission to improve health, advance knowledge, and inspire hope. This value-driven mission has guided us to provide high-quality, safe care for all of our patients. The events of 2020 have taught us now more than ever the value of working together to improve the health of our community. We are proud to have WakeMed and UNC Rex Hospitals, who are also award recipients today, as partners in making both safety and protecting the health and well-being of all of those who enter the front doors of our hospitals during these extraordinary times. I want to thank you for this honor and look forward to continuing to partner with the Cary Chamber and other Triangle hospitals to advance the health of our community during this pandemic and beyond. Thank you so much on behalf of all of our employees at Duke Raleigh Hospital.
UNC Rex is honored to accept this award. I think it's pretty cool that the Chamber is awarding all three healthcare systems that serve Cary. We all have physicians, nurses, and staff on the front line and behind the scenes fighting this pandemic. And this award recognizes and pays tribute to all of our healthcare heroes. We've had a challenging year, but just like any other year, the Rex Healthcare team has been committed and dedicated to caring for you, your family, your friends, and your neighbors when needed. On behalf of UNC Rex, we thank you for this award. We thank you for all the support that you've shown us, especially during the past 6 months. And we thank you for trusting Rex with your healthcare needs. Be safe, stay healthy. Thank you.
Good afternoon. It is a pleasure to accept this award on behalf of all the healthcare workers at WakeMed Cary Hospital and throughout WakeMed Health and Hospital System. 2020 has been both a challenging and an exciting year at WakeMed Cary Hospital. The challenge, of course, refers to the pandemic and all of the unique circumstances that has brought upon the healthcare industry overall. On the COVID front, I want to tell you that you all, as business leaders and as residents of Cary and surrounding towns, should be very proud of the staff at WakeMed Cary Hospital and throughout the WakeMed Health and Hospital System. These are, in many respects, your friends, your neighbors who, as Marty said, leave the comfort and safety of their houses every day so that they can come in and take care of what is fortunately a very small number of patients that have COVID and get very sick. And they do so with professionalism and with grace and with courage and with dedication. And I witness unbelievable things every day from them. And you all should just be very, very proud of them, as I am. I won't share with you or bore you with you statistics, but I can tell you that at Wake Cary Hospital and throughout the Triangle, the clinical outcomes for patients that have COVID have been outstanding and significantly improved relative to many other parts of the country. And I owe that and credit that to the constant surveillance that our physicians and our infectious disease experts do every day, investigating new drugs that come out and investigating new treatment methodologies. And when they're deemed safe and effective, employing them immediately in all of our hospitals. And that's a credit to their professionalism as well. On the non-COVID front, and for the 95% of patients that enter our hospitals every day, I can reassure you that we're doing everything we can to keep those patients safe, from screening all of our employees and visitors to the work we're doing around contactless registration systems and socially distanced registration systems and new and innovative cleaning methodologies, all with the hope and certainly with the expectation that if you have to come into the hospital for an inpatient service or an outpatient service, that all you'll have to worry about is getting better. On the business front, it's been an exciting year for Wake Cary Hospital. If you have traveled down Tryon Road, or Kildare Farm Road, or Asheville Avenue anytime in the last year, you'll see that we are undertaking a very ambitious expansion project. We're growing to meet the continuing growth in the healthcare needs of Cary and surrounding towns. We are adding 2 floors to the west wing of the hospital, and we have additional bed capacity this spring, which we're very excited about. And we're adding 2 new medical office buildings, one on the Cary campus and one across the street. And what's exciting about that is that it's not only going to provide room for additional physicians, but we're going to bring a lot of new services into those medical office buildings that don't exist in Western Wake right now. So we spent a lot of time looking at the incidence and prevalence of disease and specifically handpicking things that people otherwise have to travel significant distances outside of our community to obtain. So I want to conclude by saying really humbled by the fact that you've decided to recognize Wakeman Health and Hospital System and the Rex Healthcare System and Duke Raleigh with this award. It's a tribute really to all of the staff at the facilities, and thank you very much.
Mr. Zaytoon, it's quite an honor for me to be here today with you to celebrate your 100th birthday. That's pretty...
Thank you.
You're welcome. It's pretty amazing, not only to be 100 years old, to do all of the things you've done in your life is pretty incredible. And what I would like to do is read a proclamation to honor you and all of the things you've done in your life.
Wow, that's good.
All right, here we go. A lot of whereases in a proclamation, so here we go. In honor of Joseph E. Zaytoon's 100th birthday, whereas the longevity of life is a blessing for an individual and for a community which benefits from the knowledge, creativity, and experiences this individual brings to all. Whereas 100 years ago, Joseph Ellis Zaytoon was born on September 14, 1920 in Kinston, North Carolina. And whereas Joseph grew up in Eastern North Carolina, graduated from the University of North Carolina, and then settled in the Research Triangle, but found his true home in Cary for the past 50 years. Whereas Joseph has a respectable and admirable past career as a member of the greatest generation serving his country as a first lieutenant in the United States Marine Corps with active duty in the South Pacific, Guam, Guadalcanal, and China during World War II. Whereas Joseph undoubtedly compiled tremendous wisdom throughout his experiences and was able to share his wisdom with others through his role as a business and community leader, including being the co-founder of Capital National Bank, founder and owner of Zaytoon and Associates Incorporated, a lifetime member of the Tryon Palace Commission, and dedicated member of St. Andrew's Roman Catholic Church. And whereas Joseph was a thriving business leader in North Carolina and the insurance industry as a whole, as demonstrated through his career of success not only in business but also in his life. And whereas Joseph is a true example of how giving back can be so impactful to others in our community through his participation in numerous civic and cultural organizations, including the director of the Cary Chamber of Commerce, along with being named Business Leader of the Year, member of the Rotary Club of Raleigh, and distinguished alumni of the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And whereas Joseph's most significant accomplishments were not those found on a business resume, but his personal life, including his marriage of 73 plus years to his wife Thelma and their 4 children, raised with the values of hard work, morality, dedication, and goodwill to others. Now therefore, so be proclaimed that I, Harold Weinbrecht, Mayor of the town of Cary, North Carolina, on behalf of the entire Cary Town Council and the citizens of Cary, honor Joseph E. Zaytoon for his long life and prosperity and his dedication and love for our community, proclaimed this day in September 2020. Joseph, thank you so much for all you have done.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
And one more thing we'd like to honor you with. You're an outstanding citizen and have always been, so I'd like to present you with a Citizen of the Year award.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Congratulations to all of our worthy and celebrated winners, and especially to my dad. I would not be here today without his love and guidance my entire life. Semper Fi, Dad. Hoo-ah! I want to thank you for your time today to make this a very special and unique annual banquet. This year has been quite different and presented so many challenges for so many of us, but our Cary Chamber has worked diligently to continue providing opportunities for growth, networking, legislative updates, distance learning, and so much more. You should be proud to support a chamber that is working so hard to keep our community thriving and growing. Thank you for your time today. We look forward to seeing you physically in the future soon. Have a great rest of your day.
Steve, as a tradition, passing of the gavel, we want to thank you for your leadership this year and look forward to a continued wonderful year next year. Thank you.
It's a pleasure, and thank you for allowing me to serve our community.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Steve, on behalf of the...
Out there.
We're putting that in there.
Steve, on behalf of our...
I can't do it.
Steve, thank you for your leadership and your friendship. On behalf of the board... Quit now. Let's give it up for Steve.
Thank you, Howard. Thank you so much to all of you.
Thank you.